All right, guys, a little after 9 o'clock on Tuesday night, and I wanted to just hop on for a second and talk about these poll numbers that just came out and some of the key races here in Rhode Island. Very interesting stuff there. First of all, thanks to all of you that listened to the Sabina Matos episode this morning. You may have noticed the audio quality is below what it typically is here on Bartholomew Town. That's because I'm going through some IT troubles here. In Bartholomew Town, some computer issues, spent more time in the Apple store than I recommend anybody spend in that place. But actually, kudos to them. They're doing a good job, and hopefully we'll have that resolved by next week. But these poll numbers that came out. Now, this is the first poll of the season, the first real poll. There have been some ridiculous things floating around on Twitter that are, well, first of all, there's been push polls conducted where candidates conduct the polls and really frame themselves as highly favorable and all of their opponents generally as pretty unfavorable in sort of the leading questions. So those are out there. I also saw some ridiculous poll that was clearly, either made up or a very specific group of people answered that somehow put Paul Rihanna and Ray Herrera, the two renegade candidates, decidedly in the lead of the governor's race. But I don't even know why I mentioned that. Honestly, it's so irrelevant to this conversation. Today, though, a real poll, and this was conducted by Joe Fleming Associates. Look, he's the top pollster in the state. All right, he's been on Bartholomew Town. He'll continue to appear here on the podcast throughout political season. He's a tremendously talented pollster, and we'll admit, look, a lot of times these polls miss the mark, or not a lot of times, but they can miss the mark. But there's also a science to this. This poll was conducted by 12 News, WPRI, along with Roger Williams University, and again, conducted by Joe Fleming. And here's the results. Let's just go through them. The governor's race, all right, again, with a, was it 4.9? Yeah, 4.9% margin of error. McKee, 25%. Secretary of State Gorbea, 23%. Now you drop down. 7% from Matt Brown. Helena Bonanno Folks, 6%. Dr. Luis Daniel Munoz, 2%. 37% undecided. Now, folks, that is... this race comes down to two people, but one category, right? As of right now, and again, look, Helena Folks just rolling out TV ads this week. Nobody knows who she is, all right? She's got a long way to go. We've talked about this before when I was breaking down the first debate. So that's 6%. That's going to go up. But how much is it going to go up? How far behind the leaders in this race is she at this point in reality? Not just the 6% you're seeing here, but just sort of like the smell test, the vibe test. You think she may drop out? I'm not sure. Look, if she gets to a point where it's looking like she's going to turn up at an actual primary election with 6%, 9% of the vote, if it gets to that point, and we're talking July, August, you might see her drop out. But she's got the money. She's got the infrastructure. She's in terms of support and personnel in a lot of ways. 6%, she drops out. That 6% doesn't automatically go to Gorbea, but it definitely helps Gorbea's cause. Now, Matt Brown, I don't know what's going on here. 7%. I just don't even know what to make of it this year. In this race, it's an entirely different way of positioning his candidacy than it was when he was competing against Governor Raimondo in ostensibly or realistically a two-way race in the previous gubernatorial primary. And Dr. Munoz, 2%. So that obviously the margin of error could cancel out where he is. But I'm mostly interested in this, the 37% undecided. How many people are actually paying attention to politics at any level? Like, I don't know. Like, there was a time where, for sure, obviously through COVID, but even before COVID, you walk up to anybody on the street. I don't care which one. Let's say Thames Street in Newport or
I don't know, Thayer Street in Providence or whatever. Go stand outside a Stop and Shop in Wyoming, whatever it is. Wyoming, the village, not the state. Go stand outside of any public place and ask them in 2017, who's the governor of Rhode Island? I mean, what? 70%, 80% of your answers are probably going to say Gina Raimondo. How much is that now with even Dan McKee? Or secretaries? Who's your Secretary of State? How many people know the Secretary of State is Nellie Gorbea, realistically? Now, how many of that total group of people are voting? That's the next question. Then you break it down to this poll, this small sample size, but you turn up with 37% of undecideds. How many of those 37% are undecided because they have no idea who these people are? Versus, I love this about McKee, but I love this about Matt Brown, and I like this about Gorbea. I just can't decide. I think these 37, for the most part, need to be looked at as people who have absolutely no idea who any of these people are. Absolutely no idea, probably who if you ask them who the governor of Rhode Island is. Seriously. So that is to be considered as well. So going forward, name recognition is not what it probably typically is. There's the post-COVID, post-Trump, etc. politics malaise in general right now. I really believe that. Now, the people who are engaged, they're more engaged than ever. And people are into news. But the nuts and bolts of politics, I think that's a lot of that 37%. And I think that bodes very well, possibly for any candidate, maybe even including folks, maybe including Matt Brown, where they could expand their support not simply by name recognition, but by delivering, here's who I am and here's what I believe in. Because my gut is that, again, most people don't know who these people are, and if they do, they really don't understand their story, their background. They may have heard something like, oh, yeah, McKee, he was, he became governor when Gina left. But how many, does everybody even know that? So it's an interesting time right now to look at that. 37% undecided. I think that's where this thing is going to play out, obviously. I mean, that's like an elementary level of analysis, but it's, I think, more so than a typical year. Educating people who have no idea what's going on or very baseline level of what's going on and bringing them into your camp. Who's best equipped to do that? Right? Folks has got the money. Matt Brown's going to appeal to a certain group of people that may not even vote at all, if not for someone who they can believe in as, whether you want to call him the Bernie of Rhode Island. I mean, however you want to put it. Nellie Gorbea, same thing, What kind of likability factor, and what can McKee do as governor here to get more people in this state that are going to vote, that are going to talk about this in his world, to understand, first of all, who he is, and second of all, what his priorities are, so on and so forth. So it's going to come down to messaging, and barely anybody's advertised, right? I mean, this poll takes place before any significant advertising has taken place outside of the Republican Ashley Kalus, in terms of TV and radio. Now that's going to ramp up, and McKee hasn't even had an official campaign announcement yet. So there's a lot of reasons to say, hey, look, that 37% undecided, they don't undecided because they don't know what's going on, probably 32% of them. That's where this thing is going to move and shake. Looking at the lieutenant governor's race, we've now had, and by the way, all of the candidates for all these offices will be, hopefully we're going to have a number of different formats for each of the races and candidates, but you should be, if you haven't already heard in recent times, you'll be hearing from all or most of these candidates that we discuss on the podcast for in-depth one-on-one interviews. Lieutenant governor race, Sabina Matos, again, she was on the podcast today. 21%. Deb Ruggiero, 13%. The Middletown state representative, who also was recently on the pod. I think she sets herself apart in terms of policy on her advocacy for elders. I think Matos sets herself apart on her advocacy for housing. I think that I said on a Lively Experiment a few weeks ago that if you take the generic, and again, I think some people find this perhaps as an unfortunate evaluation, but I think there's a lot of voters that you go on a statewide basis. They have no idea who these people are. They see the last name Matos, they see the last name Mendez for Cynthia Mendez, and they see the last name Ruggiero, and they vote for the more European sounding name. Okay, and I think that's a horrible reality, but I think it is a reality for a lot of the uninformed voters. By the way, 53% undecided voters when it comes to lieutenant governor's race. They have no idea who these people are. They have absolutely no idea who the lieutenant governor is. Or they might have heard of her. They might be able to identify her in a pinch. They have no idea who these people are. And look, lieutenant governor, we saw that race in 2018, the Regenberg-McKee race. Regenberg dumped a bunch of money into ads on like the last day. I'm talking 6 figs during the last day to try to make that big push. Now, Matos has obviously got the best position to navigate reaching people on a statewide basis, given that she's the incumbent lieutenant governor, given that she has the type of network that she has built in that role, obviously in Providence as the former council president. Okay, obviously through family, she's very well connected inside of the Democratic Party. But Deb Ruggiero has the endorsement of Speaker Shekarchi. Again, running that campaign with a large focus on caring for elders, so on and so forth. Cynthia Mendez, again, it's interesting. She's able to garner 12% in this poll, while Matt Brown's only able to get 7%. Where's that other? Math. 5% going that Mendez gets that Brown doesn't. Is that going to Gorbea? Is a little bit of that going to Munoz? Is a little bit of that going to undecided? So that's interesting. But 53% undecided in the lieutenant governor's race. That's basically a draw at this point. Matos 22, Ruggiero 13, Mendez 12. And how about this? The last one that comes out, the Congressional District 2 Democratic primary. How about this? Now, again, big undecided number, 50%, 50%. But Seth Magaziner, 33%. Treasurer Magaziner, 33%. The next closest candidate, someone who's going to be appearing on Bartholomew Town the next couple of weeks here, is David Siegel, 5%. Joy Fox, who was just on B-Town, 4%. Sarah Morgenthau, I don't even know she's been in Rhode Island for more than 15 minutes her whole life. Who's heard of Sarah Morgenthau? She gets 4%. Cameron Moquin, 1%. Who is this guy? I mean, I know who he is, but who is this guy? What's he doing? Who is Cameron Moquin? Seriously, I mean, what is going on here in this race? You got Omar Ba, Dr. Ba, 0.4%. Omar was the first guest on B-Town Season 5 earlier this year, and someone that I certainly know through the political and activist world here in Rhode Island, but 0.4%. Again, geez. I don't want to be accusational here and suggest that the ignorance or xenophobia or racism that's out there is larger than it actually is. Because I genuinely believe the people of Rhode Island to be, by and large, just totally, by and large, totally good people, open-minded people. But I also grew up here, and I grew up in rural western Rhode Island, in Congressional District 2. Omar Ba, because of his name alone, I'm sorry, there's this chunk of voters here, and quite frankly, you know, it's the reason I got out of here for 10 years is because I know these people, you know, they're out there, and there's a lot of them that are going to say, oh, just reading that name, he's going to be dismissed. So it's an interesting situation there with Magaziner at 33%. And look, the headline event, you know, the pay-per-view matchup is Magaziner Fung. And I think that in a debate context, that's going to be really fascinating. Alan Fung was just on with Valicente on Channel 10 on 10 News Conference. I listened to that thing. He was on Sunday's episode. And look, you know, he's keeping it vague. He's trying to position himself as a moderate, so on and so forth. But that will be fascinating. But David Siegel, I kind of thought he was going to be looking closer to 10%. I got to be honest with you. I did not think that Seth Magaziner, I mean, he's the only name that most anyone has heard in this group, for sure. But I thought Magaziner was going to be in the 20s, for sure. But I thought Siegel had more momentum, and that's that perception thing of being in Providence, and you know, I know that Siegel has a lot of progressive support, and I know he's got certain influential musicians and others that are not necessarily formally endorsing him, but are sharing his materials and so on and so forth. So I kind of thought that he was going to be a little bit bigger, but when you look at Siegel and you look at Mendez and you look at Brown, and if you want to put Munoz in there too, across three different races, and you talk about true progressives in this state, Cynthia Mendez with 12% in her poll, Brown with 7% in his poll, Munoz at 2%, and then Siegel with 5%. You know, the particularly progressive voice is not even coming close right now. Not even a threat. And not even worth the attention of necessarily any sort of counter advertising at this stage, and that's surprising. You know, the ground game of the progressives that helped propel them to many local victories here in Rhode Island in 2020, that would need to be quadrupled down upon at minimum to boost the name recognition of these various candidates. And because of the fractioned peer groups, cliques, organizations, superstars, etc., in Rhode Island progressive politics, I don't know if they're going to be able to work together. Oh, this guy's in the co-op, but this guy's not. You know, Dr. Munoz believes in this, but so he's not allowed to be. We're not going to campaign for him. There's a disagreement about this, that, and the other background scene 5 years ago. This person didn't let me speak at this protest. That all that kind of nonsense is going to kill the progressive movement, because the only way they're going to make any type of move on the more established candidates here, those being Matos, and she's the closest to being in jeopardy, but still not majorly so. But Gorbea McKee, maybe folks, and Magaziner is going to be a complete all-in, jointly organized progressive strategy that, by the way, could backfire. Because I'm not so sure that David Siegel wants to be attached to Matt Brown and Cynthia Mendez, and maybe vice versa. So that's where these polls are at. Again, wicked early. Nobody knows who these people are. It's all about the undecided. I'm surprised, and how many people, how many of these people that were polled, and it'll be interesting. Joe Fleming is actually going to be on with Dan York tomorrow. We were able to book him to kind of break down this poll. So tune in at 3 o'clock on the radio on 99.7 AM 630. And I'm going to have Fleming on pretty soon here on the pod. Not specifically on this poll, though. But I'm interested to see like some more data points behind the poll. And, where does this go in a month? And does anybody drop out? You got to think. I mean, if you're polling in this congressional race at 1%, you got to go, man. I'm sorry. And I hate to say that because there's still a lot of time. But Cameron Moquin, I mean, I'm looking at this guy. I think he reached out. I'm actually pretty sure that they reached out to come on the pod. And it was one of those things where I was like, yeah, we'll figure it out. No offense. I mean, I'm happy to have every candidate on. And this is an open invitation to any candidate that wants to come on in a statewide race, including the congressional race, something like that. Or even beyond, we have a lot of local candidates on. We're going to have some Providence City Council candidates on scattered across the next several months. We'll have the big local reps on. I want to hold some forums. You look at District 9 and what's going on there, and I think that's of interest to a statewide audience, sure. But Cameron Moquin running for Congress, I mean, what's going on there? You got 1% of the vote. Or 1% of the polling approval, or what have you. And Sarah Morgenthau, she's the one who, remember, they did a questionnaire in the Providence Journal a little while ago, where they were asking, candidates very Rhode Island oriented questions. One of the questions was, describe the Dora Rebellion. You guys remember this? And then Sarah Morgenthau basically copied and pasted, or she submitted an answer that was basically, if not completely identical to the Wikipedia article about the Dora Rebellion. So I guess they have a summer house here or whatever, the Morgenthaus. I don't know. I don't remember, I should say. I did know at one point. It didn't stick with me. I'm surprised Joy Fox hasn't caught on more. But you know what? I think Magaziner... he wanted to be governor. He told me here on the pod and so on and so forth that he was happy to run for Congress. I don't believe that. And how about that? If there was a deal, not a deal cut, that sounds inappropriate, but if there was an agreement made between Helena Folks and Seth Magaziner, at least in terms of their people, that Folks is going to run for governor, Magaziner is going to run for Congress. What would this polling data look like? There's a question to leave you guys on. What does this polling data look like if Seth Magaziner doesn't run for Congress? What does this polling data look like if Seth Magaziner doesn't run for Congress and he's in the gubernatorial race and he's not in the congressional race? Who's there as the Democrat? Does Shikarchi move a little bit further into possibly running? Probably not. Does Bob Walsh jump in? Is it one of these lesser knowns that somehow, because no one's known, there's a bigger pile of undecideds, and it's going to be a photo finish type of situation. What if Magaziner doesn't get in? By the way, there's a fourth Democratic candidate for lieutenant governor. Larry Valencia announced last Friday that he's running. He's the former state rep from, Exeter, somewhere in Washington County. Larry Valencia just got into the race in the Democratic primary. He's running to abolish the office of lieutenant governor, taking a page out of Bob Healy's book. I'm just looking at the numbers one last time. I want to thank you for joining me here on this evening session, on this beautiful evening here in Providence, Rhode Island. I am using a different setup for the podcast right now. That's a little bit silly, going into my iPad, and you guys don't really care about the tech, but hopefully we'll be back online fully by next week, and I look forward to it. Coming up tomorrow on the Bartholomew Town podcast, we'll have Jocelyn Foy of the Women's Project. Really interesting and important conversation about the scope of things on a I guess, a national level with what's happening with the potential overturning of Roe v. Wade, as well as on a statewide level in terms of action that's taking place here this week inside the General Assembly. And then later in the week, a conversation with a small business owner on inflation. An Aquinic Island small business owner talking about what inflation is doing to impact them and why small business, a major component of Rhode Island's economy, obviously, is hit hardest by inflation. So especially in Newport, where we get into the housing crisis, which is very, very problematic there, as I've discussed ad nauseum. You've got employees of this small business, who are, by the way, not that this should indicate whether someone has housing or not, but they're properly compensated and so on. You know what I mean? It's not like it's a business that's doing well and has an employee base that is paid well. They can't live anywhere near the business. They can't live on Aquinic Island. They can't find a place to live, so they're driving from a million miles away, paying gas, paying bridge tolls. On top of that, just the overall inflation that's taking place is adding and exacerbating the strain on their wallets. Now, the small business owner, as you'll hear, makes some programmatic adjustments on their end, but I'm sure most business owners aren't being so generous. So that's coming up later in the week as well. Plus whatever else happens if there's breaking news. Okay, everybody, enjoy the rest of your evening, and talk to you tomorrow morning for the Women's Project episode. Bye.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.